All right. So for those of you who don't know me, I am the other half of Commonwealth Homeownership with Brad here. You might have heard me on some of my podcasts. I still have, so I've been an investor for quite a few years now, have a decent sized portfolio, mostly buy and holds up in Edmonton. I have recently published a book late last year about how to get started in investing in real estate. It is called The Real Estate Side Hustle for Investors. You can find it on Amazon. And I still have a full-time job. For those of you who are, thinking that you can't do this with a full-time job, you can totally do it with a full-time job. I'm still a full-time pharmacist. So, but I love this stuff. I totally nerd out on it, and and I love sharing what I learn to others. So today I want to talk about energy management. So I call time management's bigger brother, just because a lot of people talk about. Oh, let me give me a second. Let me get control here. Sorry, guys. All right. So a lot of people talk about time management, and which is great. Time management is important in terms of how you manage your time, but what they don't talk a lot about is how you manage your energy. So just because no matter how much time you have, if you don't manage your energy properly, time doesn't really matter in the end. But let's just go over a few time management techniques that you may have heard about. So first of all, time blocking your calendar. This is very popular. Schedule what you need to do over the course of your day. What gets scheduled gets done. I subscribe to this on my Google Calendar is a good example of that. It looks very similar to that. Next is do the hardest thing first, right? Or as you may have heard, Eat That Frog. I don't know if any of you read that book, but it's all about doing the hardest thing first. Get that out of the way. Use the Pomodoro technique. Pomodoro is actually Italian for tomato. So if you've ever heard the tomato timer technique, set a timer for 25 minutes. Do as much as you can in 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break, and then repeat. And do that, over 3-4 times, take a longer break, repeat that over the course of the day. The whole idea is to get as much done in a short amount of time. Putting the time pressure on you pushes you to get more done faster. Batch similar tasks together. So science has shown that by switching tasks, typically takes time. It takes your mind a while to switch gears. So by batching similar tasks together allows you to get more done in a short amount of time. And learn how to say no to less important tasks. So focus on prioritizing what's important. A phrase I heard Tim Ferriss say: "If it's not a hell yes, it's a no." So something to live by. But what is energy management? So first of all, energy management starts with your circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm is you may have heard of it, but it's the internal clock, it's an internal biological clock that all organisms have, whether it be a plant, a bacteria, an animal. All animals have a circadian rhythm, and it tells you when to wake up, when to go to sleep, when to eat, and it controls your physiological and biological and psychological rhythms throughout the day. So each of us has what's called a chronotype. So this is the personal circadian rhythm that influences each of our personal physiology and psychologies. So you may have heard of the terms larks, owls. So these are stereotypes of different chronotypes. And there's more and more evidence showing that a lot of these chronotypes are genetic. You're actually born an owl or born a lark. There is environmental factors and there is biological factors over the course of the day, over the course of your lifetime that changes these. But for the most part, a lot of these are genetic. So just because you don't like getting up in the morning doesn't mean you're lazy. It just means you're born that way. Okay, so don't feel bad about that. So in the entrepreneurial world, I find that there is a lot of reverence for early risers, and I feel like that's a bit of a bias.
I would like to jump in on that because I'm definitely not a morning person, but I can sit up till 2 in the morning and happily work away. And
And
comes natural.
so if this presentation seems a little biased, thanks Brad for that. It seems a little biased because I too am an owl. Sorry. So, but I do feel the morning people do get a little bit too much credit, just because if you look at all the books that are out there, it talks about how awesome it is to wake up at 5 in the morning and crush the day. I mean, it's great for those people who can get up at 5 in the morning and have a clear brain. But for some of us, That doesn't happen. And you rarely, actually never, I did it as a search, you cannot find a book that says how stay up late to be productive or anything along those lines, right? It's like crush your goals at 2 in the morning. There's nothing like that. It's always morning books. But there are famous night owls. And the thing is with mornings, I find that I think a lot of people those people get recognized more because our society is geared for morning early risers. It is not made for night owls. Work starts at 7, 8 in the morning. Work does not go late. So those who do well early tend to be noticed, and those who don't do late tend to be a little bit more obscure. But there are a lot of famous night owls. For example, Bob Dylan is a good one. Thomas Edison, known for staying up till 6 in the morning, working on his projects. Barack Obama, famous night owl, and this guy, as you might know. So, but more and more evidence, yeah, like I said, is showing that it doesn't mean that we don't get things done as night owls. It just means that we just do them at a different time. So how to determine your personal chronotype. So on a free day, so on a day where you have no obligations, are not working, ask yourself these 3 questions. What time do you usually go to sleep? If you could just go on your own. What time do you usually wake up if you had no alarm? And what is the middle of these 2 times? For example, if you go to bed at 11:30 and you wake up at 7:30, then the middle time would be 3:30. So in order to determine your chronotype, I found this little infographic, which is great. It's from a book called When by Daniel Pink. And it shows that if your wake up time, or if your middle of the time is between 1 a.m. to 3:30 a.m., you're a lark. Between 3:30 a.m. and 5:30 a.m., you're what's called a third bird. So you're not a specifically owl. Like most people are actually not one or the other. 65% of the population actually fall into the third bird category. However, you still wake up relatively early compared to owls, whose middle time is starts at 6 a.m. So, and these chronotypes actually change. I mentioned this earlier, but chronotypes actually change over the course of your lifetime. As for anyone who's a parent would know, babies or young kids are typically larks. They like to wake up early. And once you move into your teens and your 20s, you gradually become an owl. So in teenagers, if you remember those times, waking up for school was one of the hardest things to do in the world. And then as you move into older age, as you progress, as you get older, you slowly become a lark again. And that's why a lot of seniors like to go to bed early, because they tend to wake up early as well. So 25% are solid evening types. And then there's the personality types associated with those. You can see it right there. Or another easier way to ask yourself to figure out your chronotype is, what time do you wake up on the weekends when you don't have to work? And so if you wake up around the same time you would if you were working, or in the weekday, then you're likely a lark. If you wake up a little bit later, you're likely a third bird. If you wake up more than 90 minutes after you typically wake up during a weekday, then you're likely an owl. I'll leave that up there for just another second if you want to take a picture of it.
Phil, can you, before you jump on to the next one, the previous slide, can you explain the previous slide a little more?
Yeah.
This one here. So the example at the bottom, what are we doing here?
So the example, for example, what is the middle of those 2 times? So when you go to bed and when you wake up, find the middle time. So the example is if you go to bed at 11:30 and you wake up at 7:30, what is that? What is the middle time of those times? What is 4 hours past 11:30, right? Which is 3:30 in the morning. And then if you go to this graph here, if you see the graph here, 3:30 would land you kind of more or less in the lark territory.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So, and that graph in the middle there determines what your middle time is. So if your middle time, your midpoint of sleep is any of those times, then it categorizes you in that category. So Brad, if you go to bed at 2 a.m. and you wake up at 10 a.m., the middle time is 6 a.m., which will land you at the beginning of the owl territory.
Got it. Thank you.
That makes sense. So So, and so what? So what if your chronotypes are a little bit different, right? So every person's circadian rhythm, this has been proven over studies for thousands of people, follows a very common trend in terms of energy and emotional peaks and troughs over the course of the day. So everybody, regardless of whether you're an owl or a lark, follows a, so everyone has a peak, a trough, and a rebound. So typically, so right here is the first peak. That's a peak, that's a trough, and that's a rebound. However, these peak, trough, and rebound patterns are a little bit different whether you are a lark, a third bird, or an owl. So lark and third bird energy levels look something like this. Very, very, very typical. You peak in the early morning, early afternoon. You trough approximately 7 hours after you wake up. So at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, between 1 and 5 in the afternoon, you have a bit of trough. That's your low point. If any of you've all experienced this, likely. You after lunch, you feel very tired. You just want to take a nap. You feel very low in energy. You don't really want to do much. And then later in the evening, after you come home from work, you get a rebound. And some people think that might just be a result of not being at work anymore, which is fine. But it's actually a natural energy pattern that a lot of people have. So for larks and third birds, your peak is where you are most productive. So you are the sharpest at your peak. So you want to group tasks that require vigilance and clear thinking at your peak period. So that includes any problem solving things you might have, any important decisions you might have to make. You want to put it in your peak. For your rebound, you're typically not as sharp as when when you are at your peak. So here you want to schedule tasks that require a little bit more disinhibition and creativity. So a little bit more insight. For brainstorming is a good example of what you would put in your rebound time. Any creative projects, writing, if you're doing the writing projects that require a little bit of creativity, would be a good time to place in your rebound. And I'll go over the trough a little bit later, but here there are specific ways you can mitigate, that downturn of your day. Owls, on the other hand, are scheduled a little bit differently. So their energy patterns look the same. I mean, in terms of peak and rebound, and they still have those ups and downs throughout the day. However, they take a little bit longer to ramp up in the morning. So instead of a peak trough rebound, they have a rebound trough peak pattern. So in the mornings, that's when they should schedule some of their more creative tasks. And then in the evening is when they should schedule some of their more vigilance and clear thinking tasks, just because that is when owls peak. I find, Brad, I'm sure you've experienced this, but sometimes at midnight you find you're most productive, right? Versus first thing in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can definitely relate to that trough there at 2 p.m. I mean, some days would be like clockwork. Literally, I could look at the clock and see 2 p.m. and just a feeling, that kind of drained feeling, mentally drained, tired. It was almost like I needed to go and have a nap. And then, once kind of 4 o'clock, 4:30, 5 o'clock hit, I would literally start feeling like, okay, now it's time to work, which always felt strange because that would be the time that you're leaving work.
Yes.
So it's such a weird organic feeling, but it's real. So
yeah, and which is why it's tough because society gears towards morning birds, like morning larks, right? They all the work is scheduled in the morning, where they are most productive, but sometimes we're not at our top performance for those who are owls. Unfortunately, owls are only 25% of the population, so no one really cares. So let's talk about the trough, that little dip in the middle of the day. So it typically happens around 7 hours after waking, give or take. Change is unique to everyone, but in general, around 7 hours after waking. And scientists have measured that the difference of performance between the peak and the trough is equivalent to being legally intoxicated. Right? It's just significant. Like you don't feel it, but I mean, imagine trying to drive while you're in that trough, you almost feel like you're drunk sometimes. So, in which case, pull over, take a nap, take a break. But how do we mitigate those troughs? How do we prevent those dips in the day from, ruining our productivity, or how do we make it so that you can at least use that point to recharge to make the rest of our day better.
I'm
So
sure
first of all,
I'm sure we've all had those days where you drive home from work in the afternoon, you get home and you think to yourself, I don't even really remember driving home, because you're in that trough state.
exactly. And yeah, there's definitely time to pull over, because that's also when you're really tired, you also fall into what they call micro sleeps, where you kind of just your attention just breaks for just a second, but that's usually enough to get into an accident. So also be very mindful. If you're feeling really tired, pull over, take a 10-minute break. That's enough to recharge. So how to mitigate that trough? Taking frequent breaks throughout the day. And research has shown that even a 5-10 minute break is enough to boost your energy levels after that break. So if you take frequent breaks throughout the day, you might not feel that trough as sharply. Go for a walk. Activity is always better than no activity. So if you're taking a break, go for a walk outside. It's way better than sitting at a desk. Get social. If you can talk to others, if you can socialize with other coworkers, and you can talk about things other than work, that tends to boost your energy levels. And go outside. It's super important. Sunlight is extremely effective in waking you up. The reason sunlight is good compared to your ambient light is sunlight has it's a full spectrum of light, but it more importantly has blue light. And blue light is actually what inhibits melatonin production in your brain. And melatonin is it's this hormone that causes you to get drowsy. So by inhibiting melatonin, it wakes you up. However, this is also why having screens right before bed, like TVs, phones, is also bad, because phones also emit blue light, which also inhibits melatonin production. So if you do that before you go to sleep, that might also make it harder to fall asleep. And detach. Super important to detach from work. Research has shown that even reading emails during your break can lead to increased fatigue. So it's important to get away from work as best you can. So really the best way to mitigate that trough is to go with a coworker outside for a walk, for a break, and talk about anything other than work. That's probably one of the best ways to boost your energy. And lastly, if you don't want to do any of those, take a nap. Naps are great if you do it right. All right. There's naps, because I know a lot of people there's a stigma against naps, because naps will make you not be able to sleep at night. Naps make you feel super groggy when you wake up and you feel unproductive. There is a way to take a nap that you can prevent all of those things. So I want to talk about how to take the perfect afternoon nap. So this is, I love this. I do this often. So first of all, find your afternoon trough time. When do you typically feel tired the most during the course of your day? And what you can do, if most of you likely know, but if you really want to find out, you can always do a journal. Set your alarm every 90 minutes. Ask yourself, what are you doing, and what are your energy levels? And do that for a week. And then that way you can graph that over the course of a week, and then you have a good idea when your trough times are. Secondly, find a peaceful place to take a nap. Okay. Office couch, car, if you're at work, if it's not too cold or too hot. Secondly, down a cup of coffee or caffeine beverage of your choice. So this is a little bit different, but it's cool, because caffeine actually takes about 25 to 30 minutes to hit your bloodstream. So if you can down a whole cup of coffee, or take a caffeine pill, 100 to 200 milligrams, that is equivalent to a medium to large cup of coffee. One medium cup of coffee has about 100 milligrams of caffeine. A venti from Starbucks has about 180 milligrams of caffeine. So 100 to 200 milligrams of caffeine right before you decide to take your nap. And then set a timer for 25 to 30 minutes. This is super important, do not let your nap exceed 30 minutes. If it exceeds 30 minutes, that's when you trigger what's called sleep inertia. And sleep inertia is that groggy feeling when you wake up and you feel super lethargic, and it takes you some time to get back going again. as long as it stays under 30 minutes. So ideally between 10 to 20 minutes is a perfect time. And then, so by having caffeine right before your nap, you just get the added benefit of both the boost from the caffeine and the re-energizing boost from your short nap. So to avoid sleep inertia, the perfect nap duration is 10 to 20 minutes. So they've actually done studies on this. 10 to 20 minutes is perfect. It takes about 5 minutes to fall asleep. You nap for about 20 minutes. Your alarm goes off at 30 minutes. You stay under that. You still get a nap within that range. Anything less than 5 minutes actually has very little benefit, and anything over 30 minutes triggers sleep inertia. So this graph explains it very well. If you take a brief short nap, it'll give you that boost, the cognitive boost, without that dip after you wake up. And it doesn't last as long. That boost doesn't last as long. So also, if you take too long a nap, that also where it affects your nighttime sleep, because that effect from the sleep lasts longer. So it'll go into, it might actually go into when you actually have to go to sleep. Whereas a short, brief nap, 20-minute nap will give you that boost without causing you not to be able to sleep later in the night. And all this I've gone over is moot if you don't get proper sleep, right? So proper sleep is the foundation of everything you do. And more, and the latest in sleep science has shown that sleep is actually more important than almost anything you do in your life, frankly. If you think about it, sleep is, evolutionarily speaking, sleep is terrible, right? Sleep, when you're sleeping, you can't protect yourself. You can't forage for food. You can't, you can't reproduce. You can't mate. You can't do anything other than sleep. Sleep leaves you extremely vulnerable. So evolutionarily speaking, you think evolution would have eliminated sleep if for the benefit of the species, but instead it has made sleep stuck around, and it makes sleep a third of our lives. So that itself is showing that how important sleep is. Only recently have we really discovered how important sleep is in terms of our health and our performance. And the worst part about not getting enough sleep is that you don't even know it. They've done studies where they've shown, ask someone to take 8 hours of sleep or 6 hours of sleep, and the performance, and they do a survey and they feel exactly the same. But when they actually test the performance, the person who got 6 hours sleep performs way worse than the person who actually got a full 8 hours, even though they feel exactly the same. They don't feel any worse. So even if you feel great, you might be performing poorly and you don't even know it. So yeah, what I mentioned earlier. And so ideal sleep time has been 7.5 to 8.5 hours, ideally. And this is sleep time. So make sure you give yourself enough sleep opportunity in bed to actually achieve this sleep time, right? Just because you're in bed for 7.5 hours doesn't mean you actually get 7.5 hours of sleep. So it takes time to fall asleep. So something to keep in mind. So in summary, important to manage your time and utilize time management strategies to maximize productivity, but it's also important to know when to schedule those tasks throughout the day. To mitigate troughs, take frequent breaks, go outside, socialize, detach, or take a coffee nap. And if you guys are interested in learning more about the subjects, there's a couple books I found as really good resources on this. It's one is When by Daniel Pink, and the second is Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, PhD. Matthew Walker is actually from the UK, for those who care. So from where you're from, Wayne. And the audiobook is actually with an English accent, which is kind of nice. Anyway, so any questions anyone might have? That was a very brief overview. Like if you read those books, there's way more data and way more research on this subject, but I thought I'd give you guys a very brief highlight on those subjects that I found very fascinating in terms of increasing your productivity.
Yeah, it's definitely really important. I mean, when you're working on multiple projects or businesses, I mean, you tend to push sleep aside so that you can just continue to get through whatever it is you need to get done. But it actually ends up having a little bit of a negative effect. And you end up run down and having to sleep anyway and less productive. And
you're way less productive. Yeah, by sleeping more, you actually get less done. You get more done in less time.
Yeah, it's efficient. Just it is hard to manage it because it just doesn't feel like you, at the time, it doesn't feel like you need to take heed. So thanks for the presentation, Phil.
You're welcome. And Amanda just has a question. What if you sleep too much? So research has shown that sleep is actually a bit of a bell curve. If you sleep too much, if you sleep more than 10 hours a day, it does show a decline in overall health. They're not really sure how yet. I think they're still doing research on that, but um, yeah, but if you sleep too much, it actually shows a bit of a decline.
I'm with Jeff. No such thing. But that's great. All right, guys. We'll keep moving here. We've still got a few things to get through, so I'm just going to take back control here, Phil. And I can see Victor's joined us. He's making me jealous. He's got a beer in front of him, and it's probably because he can't go on vacation right now. So he's making the most of the downtime.